Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar about building a data mesh with Collibra and Google Cloud Dataplex. Next slide. My name is Uri Gilad. I'm a senior product manager focusing on data governance in Google Cloud. And with me is Koen van der Uys. Koen, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Yuri. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Koen. So today we're here to talk about data meshes and how they can make working with data better. In the next slide, I talk about what a data mesh is, which is really an evolution of the traditional way of working with data. In the traditional way, we have several organizations or individuals producing data. Those people are serviced by a specialized service team who basically is charged with monitoring the lake, making sure the architecture is up to speed and that compute storage resources are being serviced. And the service team is providing data to data consumers, such as business users running BI, data analysts running big data analytics, and data science teams. The problem with this architecture is that the service team itself becomes a bottleneck when rapid access to new data types, new data set is requested. In addition, the data consumers are effectively buffered from additional context, additional meaning of data from the data producers because the service team really sits in the middle. The next slide talks about a potential architecture called the data mesh, which is really the next generation of enterprise data platforms. As platforms become easier to use and allow you to democratize data more effectively, we find ourselves in a situation where we can generate a data domain for each service team for each service producing team by allowing them to directly contribute data into a data domain, really, a federated cloud-based data mart. This is going to be covered for putting guardrails and security and governance policies by a data governance framework, and will use the same infrastructure across the organization. In this environment, the data consumers really connect with the individual data producing team to get direct access to the data, and they can join data from various data domains to achieve a business purpose. For example, in the next slide, we talk about Dataplex, which is a product that allows you to organize the data in a unified fashion across multiple data silos and multiple data analytics and storage architecture and systems. So with Dataplex, you can decide on a overall overarching data governance framework and allow unified governance controls. You can have an integrated analytics experience regardless of where the data sits. You can access it using the same Python-enabled, SQL-enabled notebooks. And you have an open platforms, which means you can bring any tools to modify or aggregate or use the data as you were with previously. Now, Dataplex exposes a unified interface to all of the data. And you can learn more about it at cloud.google.com/Dataplex. In the next slide, we talk about how you can potentially create a Dataplex, with Dataplex, a data mesh, by basically allowing the data science team on the bottom left of this drawing access to multiple data domains to achieve a business purpose. The data science team will be released from the need to care about policies for accessing the data. The platform will provide that and will enjoy collaborative analytics. The same way you can have a BI team run SQL queries across a different set of domains. Again, by virtually allowing Dataplex to organize your data and allow access to different teams to different domains. Koen will now talk a little bit about how Collibra can make this impact even greater.
Hey, thanks, Yuri. Excellent. So let's have a look, right? That's why Collibra on top of Dataplex and how does Collibra fit into this data mesh architecture. Collibra, simply put, will greatly extend and build on what Dataplex delivers. Because keep in mind that for a lot of data mesh architecture, there might be talk of a hybrid or multi-cloud architecture. So that's one thing. And then the other is to add this rich business context that we need to put on top of what comes out of Dataplex. The good thing about Collibra is that the core of Collibra is built around federated governance. So the concept of data domains and policies, like the central policies that get executed and controlled and worked on in almost like per domain, right? I wanted to say silo, but I guess that's not the right word to use here, but with full visibility, but worked out per data domain, that's core to Collibra. So if in Dataplex we've got these, and in our data mesh architecture, we've got these different zones like sales and customer and products, Collibra can model that out and can ingest what's in Dataplex and then work on the resources in it. And then in a bit, we'll talk about what we're going to do on top. And then everything that's derived from this, the notebooks, SQL queries, and so on, they can be brought in for governance and visibility cataloging into Collibra as well. So this is, it's really an extension on top of Dataplex. A couple of examples. Here are some data domains. Really fits into that federated governance. Each data domain could have their own operating model. How do we talk about data here? What's a certain KPI in one data domain might mean something else in another data domain. Yet when we push it back down to Dataplex, it will all be unified. Different workflows, different definitions, but all controlled within one governance framework. And then under each data domain, there could be multiple assets or resources, as it's called in Dataplex, and there could be multiple ones and with their own way of describing it as well. A more visual view. This is then from the lineage side of Collibra, or diagramming. You see here clearly defined a data domain layer that's worked out in Collibra, or conceptually a model for marketing in this case. We can then link that to information that comes from the data store layer. This would be then Dataplex, and then Collibra will add the glossaries, the business process layer, all the sections around regulations. So think of all this technical metadata. What does it mean when put in context of sales, product, and so on? What business processes produce it? What are data consumers? But then also things like assessments, DPIAs, whatever we need on the regulation side. So on this regulation side, or in between these two here, is where we're going to find the policies. And just a quick example of what would live in Collibra. This is just a very technical example because we're still building this out, but here is a Dataplex zone that either got created in Collibra or we ingested from Dataplex. But you see some of the metadata being reflected already. And so imagine if we create this in Collibra, we push it down to Dataplex, then we're going to see that reflected in Dataplex as well. What's most likely going to happen, though, is the flow I'm going to talk you through now, which is really using Dataplex and Collibra to enable a use case called internal data marketplace or shopping for data, which takes a lot of the data mesh principles. And I'm going to go through them now, and that'll like solidify the picture. So the first thing, keep in mind, data mesh is all about making sure that you're not stuck with this central team that owns the data lake, that is left with the cleanup and making sure that the data is standardized and good data quality and so on and so on. Right? That's the whole problem that we started in the original article of data mesh. That's where you see all the frowny faces. So the first thing we're going to do is ingest and build and scan and profile and do a quality check of the sources before they go into the data mesh, because we want the people, the teams, the SMEs, the owners that own that data, that we want them to be identified and on the hook, if you will, if there are any issues. So we're going to build what we call a data source catalog by doing an either simple registering sources per domain, early on classifying them in the right taxonomies, and then we can go as far as doing quality checks, legitimate interest assessments, assigning business processes, detecting where our sensitive data is, so that we have a nice catalog already that represents really everything that our marketplace will be, with the data producers identified. And from that catalog, the consumers could come and pick and say, okay, I want that data and I want it ingested in my data lake, for which Collibra will use the metadata to alert and push down to Dataplex. Collibra does not do the ingestion itself. We're not an ETL tool, but then we can work with the data flows or maybe a Matillion, Fivetran, and so on, data fusion as well, to make sure that the right data goes to the right zone and lake, and gets the right policies assigned as well. What's key then as well, and this comes back in the original article of Data Mesh as well, is keep the responsibility for good data quality with the source. Right? That's why this works so well. We've got our data source catalog. We're going to either on the source or as the data streams into the data mesh into Google Cloud, we're going to observe the data automatically without intervention through unsupervised learning, come up with the checks that should be in place, and then observe the data as it resides or comes into Google Cloud. And because we know who's the owner here, if there are issues, we go back to these people. And it's not the central team that's responsible. That's key. So what's key for Collibra here when it says governed ingestion is not the ETL part. That's for the the data plane, the Google or a partner, but a centralized governance layer, right? So central policies. Here's what we expect your data to be adhered to if you use email addresses, for example, but you implement it, right? You on the data source implement it, or at least if there are issues, your team will help out. Here's a little quote from the original article. So we want the accountability of data quality as close as possible to the source. That's really what this comes down to. Not just about data quality, it's about sensitive data, standards, and so on. Then the key piece, right? So once we know what the data looks like, and we can, it passes the usage policies, we have the right quality, business glossary, so it should be in the data lake or the Google Cloud Platform. We're going to then derive the policies in Collibra, work with business, legal to come up with the right policies, attach them to the metadata, and then push back down to Dataplex to make sure that the right policies are informed across the data lake. So GCS, BigQuery, and everything else, right? That's where the synergy will be beautiful, if in a way. And then to the last point of Yuri, if something great is built on top of this, and somebody comes to the catalog and says, hey, I'm looking for weather data, but we know that there's already a notebook or a Tableau workbook or report or a Looker report is created, we can then point those users to say like, hey, look, don't start from scratch. It's already available. At the same time, if there is no weather data in the data mesh yet, we might let them pick from the library and then kickstart the ingestion via the right mechanisms and control the right access, rights, permissions, policies via Dataplex into the data mesh. That's the whole flow that we're working to. More to come on this. If you want to know more about what Collibra does already with Google, I talk about the interactions with the data catalog of Google, BigQuery, Looker, and so on, go to the first link. Specifically, Dataplex is described very well at the second link. And then the paradigm of data mesh, go directly to the source, what Zhamak Dehghani wrote up, and go to the article or the link at the bottom.
Thanks, Koen, and thank you all for joining us today. Hopefully this will get you started on thinking about your data architecture and hopefully even utilizing Dataplex and Collibra in a data mesh. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.